Hello again, Internet. Astro with Roro here. Astrophotography is a game of diminishing returns. There's always more that can be spent to get an incrementally smaller improvement in results. But the challenge that I really enjoy in astrophotography is to see how much we can get by spending less, and what we actually do get by spending that extra bank. And today, we're going to tackle that question head on with this, the SvBony Sv105 planetary camera. And we're going to see how well it performs compared to some of the more premium cameras available today. First off, some disclosure. SvBony sent me this camera to look at, but no money changed hands, they haven't had any input on this video, and they don't get to preview it before it gets posted. If you'd like to understand more about how I deal with this kind of content, jump over and check out my video called Can You Trust Astro with Roro? So let's talk about the elephant in the room. This camera is priced at under 60 Australian dollars, and there is nothing else in this price point that I've been able to find. That is an exceptionally cheap planetary camera. So how will it go when it's pitted up against this, the ASI462? This is ZWO's premium camera and costs almost 500 Australian dollars. So what can the Sv105 do for 1/8 of the cost? And is it worth spending that money jumping into a value-oriented camera like the Sv105, or should you bite the bullet and go with a more premium camera from the get-go? Well, today we're going to have a planetary shootout between these two cameras, and I will be leaving you as the judge as to whether you think one of these cameras is better value than the other. The following tests you will see have been run using the exact same equipment. I've used my Skywatcher EQ6R Pro mount as the mount, the Skywatcher SkyMax 150 as the telescope, and then each of these cameras running in their native format. So let's jump into the first test. Here you can see some raw footage. This is a Jupiter. Here you can see some more raw footage. Could you tell which one was taken with the more expensive camera? Well, here are the results. This one is the Sv105, and this one is the ASI462. But we're not here to look at planetary video. What we're here to look at is how well can they extract those tiny details out after some easy post-processing. Luckily for you, I have already done the post-processing and come up with a final image for each of these. They have both gone through AutoStack at 3 to take that video down to a single frame. I then ran them through Registack 6 with the exact same wavelet options on both, done a light noise removal on both of them, and rotated them so they're both in the same frame of reference. First up here we have the ASI462, and I think this is a great little picture of Jupiter, especially considering it was taken from my inner city balcony where I have a very limited sky view. Unfortunately, we're under lockdown at the moment, so this is the best I could do, and there is a lot of air turbulence that occurs in a city environment, which does create some terrible seeing. All things considered, I think this is done very well, and as we zoom in here, you can see there's definitely some nice detail inside of all of the bands of color. So let's swap over to the SvBony Sv105. And I got to admit, I was quite surprised at how well this came out. I didn't expect a $60 camera to hold up quite so well to a $500 premium planetary camera. You can still see all the color in the bands. In fact, I actually prefer the color of the SvBony Sv105. But unfortunately, as we start to zoom in here, you notice that we do lose a little bit of that granular detail that the 462 was able to pull out. And we will discuss more of why that is in a minute. The other thing I notice here is there is definitely some fringing going on or slight artifacting, and I believe that's because this isn't true raw footage. Let's move on to the next test, which is Saturn. This time, let's start with the Sv105. And here is Saturn from the Sv105. And what a great little shot. I really just love images of Saturn. Once again, I really enjoyed the color in this image, and there's some great definition from the boundary lines on Saturn's planetary body, as well as those classic shadows that come into the rings. As we swap over to the ASI462 though, you will notice that there is a slight increase in contrast and definition here that the Sv105 wasn't able to capture. But all in all, these are remarkably close. I didn't expect a camera that was 1/8 of the cost to come anywhere near as close in quality to the ASI462. Results are one thing though, but how was it to actually use and edit the footage of the Sv105? Well, let's quickly go over some pros and cons of this camera to give you a more well-rounded idea of what it's like to use. Let's start with the cons, starting off with the lack of an ASCOM driver. Unfortunately, this camera doesn't come with a dedicated driver or ASCOM driver, which does limit some of the software you're able to use this camera with. For example, I wasn't able to get it using in Fire Capture, which is my default Planetary imaging software. But since this camera is a plug and play camera, it does work with SharpCap, which is a fantastic piece of software and does allow you to do both deep space and planetary imaging very easily. And I had no trouble at all controlling this camera or capturing images or videos from this camera through SharpCap itself. Secondly is the capture speed of this camera. Unfortunately, the camera only has a USB 2 interface, and this definitely limits the camera's capability to capture frames. Most planetary imaging these days is done using a form of lucky imaging, where you take as many photos as you can in a short period of time to try and capture still moments in the atmosphere. 30 frames a second is definitely not bad, but it is very much on the lower side of planetary imaging capabilities. For example, the ASI462 can go from 60 all the way up to about 140 frames depending on the field of view that you choose. The SvBony is hard locked at 30. My final con for this camera is that it only has a 10-bit ADC. Now, this 10-bit depth does limit the contrast and detail that the camera is able to pull out, and this combined with the 30 frame per second limit is why I believe this camera wasn't able to capture all the details that the ASI462 had. Because the ASI462 is a 12-bit depth camera instead of 10 and has those extra frames so it can capture more data in the same amount of time. Now, this can be offset slightly on certain planets like Saturn, where you can take longer videos without needing to worry about rotation. However, with something like Jupiter, you're really stuck to a couple of minutes before you start noticing a huge amount of rotation and losing detail in your stacking. But they are my only cons for this camera, which is saying a lot considering how cheap this camera is to purchase. So let's now talk about the pros, of which there are definitely more. Firstly is, of course, the price. It is so hard to go past the value of this camera, and I really didn't expect to get the results that I did from such a value-oriented package. Second up is its compact size. If you can see here, it is markedly smaller than the ASI462, which does make it much easier to pack and carry around. Next up is the solid construction. This camera is made using some sort of metal anodized body. It looks really nice. It is very solid, and I have no issues with the quality of the build. Straight out of the box, it also comes with a 1.25-inch adapter with a built-in thread, making it really easy to attach 1.25-inch filters straight to the front. No need for a separate filter wheel, which I love. The SvBony is also very easy to use. It is fully plug and play and doesn't need any dedicated drivers. It also comes with a very long lead, so you can simply plug it in at one end, plug in the USB at the other, and you can see there is plenty of space to make it to your laptop. This plug and play functionality is fantastic, makes it very easy to use and very beginner friendly if you're looking to make your first steps into planetary imaging. As I mentioned earlier in this video, this camera has very good color rendition straight out the box. I didn't need to increase any saturation in post, and it managed to get the white balance really nice in the planetary imaging as well. Finally, I really enjoy the pixel size of this camera. It's actually almost identical to that of the ASI462, which is ZWO's premium planetary camera, so you know that it's going to be a good pixel size if ZWO chooses it as their top of the range camera. So what is my overall impression of this camera? Well, I got to admit, I was very skeptical of this camera going in. I did not have high hopes, being so cheap compared to other cameras that I have used. I really just didn't see how it would be able to hold its own. But I was very pleasantly surprised, and as you can see from the images we looked at before, it really is able to do a remarkable job given the cost of the unit. This truly is a testament to SvBony and how much they've been able to pack into this little package, which I would feel comfortable recommending this camera to those of you who are looking to take your first steps into planetary or lunar photography, or don't have the budget to jump up to some of the more premium cameras. If you'd be interested in me creating a video with a more detailed walkthrough of how I use this camera and the settings that I used, please leave some comments down in the description below so I know that's something you'd be interested in watching. If you would like to see the full high-resolution version of the images that I displayed in this video, have a look down in the description below where you'll be able to download them in full-size JPEG renditions. I hope you've enjoyed this video and learnt something. Stay safe and clear skies.